8 days from today, we have the first round of the NBA draft. 9 days, second round of the NBA draft.
Hey-o.
2-day event for a 2-round draft.
The thing nobody asked for.
You're dang right they didn't. But we're still excited for it here in Portland because the Portland Trailblazers hold the number 7 and 14 picks in the first round of the draft. They have 2 second-round picks as well. And to discuss all things NBA draft and what it looks like for the Portland Trailblazers, we bring on now the lead NBA scout and draft insider for Bleacher Report, Jonathan Wasserman, kind enough to take a few minutes for us. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How's it going, guys?
Doing very well. I'm assuming, I can't imagine how busy you are this time of year with whether it is information coming in or smoke signals that teams and agents are trying to send you. And that's kind of where I want to start with you is how do you kind of decipher through what is a smoke signal and what is, some concrete and good information that you're getting from whether it's players, agents, coaches, GMs, executives around the league?
You really just have to use common sense. And maybe my first year in the business, I believed everything I heard. I was excited to get information. At this point now, you kind of have a filter and you sift through and you kind of decide what you want to buy, what you want to sell, who's selling it to you. And over the years, you get to know some of these people and know their track records in terms of how often they're right, how often they're wrong, how much they overvalue their own guys, their own teams. So you kind of just have to use some common sense, which I think I've built up a little of that over the years.
Jonathan, one of the storylines of this draft class is the lack of a number one, and even that a couple players at the top that you go, yeah, no, those guys are going to go here, and here. Particularly as it pertains to the intel front, there's been a lot of talk about behind the scenes about Sarr trying to direct himself maybe away from Atlanta into Washington, and Atlanta trying to kind of figure out what they want to do at this point. What do you kind of see as the dominoes that are going to fall leading into the draft that are going to change so much of the top, couple picks?
Yeah, so I got a text here today from somebody, who's around the team. It sounds like there's kind of maybe 3 or 4 guys that Atlanta has been looking at and considering this whole time. I know Landry Fields, GM of the Hawks, came out yesterday publicly to an Atlanta media outlet and said they didn't plan on trading the number 1 pick. You don't know if that was strategy or whatnot, but we know they're interested in Zachary Reese-Shea. They were recently at one of his playoff games. They bring in Donovan Cleum, who is one of the hottest names in the draft conversation, and one of the most interesting names because of his draft range and really the fact that he only plays one position, so a lot of teams may not be interested. Then you, of course, have Alex Sarr, who's been at the top of this conversation throughout the season. And I know Matas Buzelis is kind of a big wild card here from what I'm hearing in terms of top 5 teams and interest. I've had Reese-Shea at number 1, again, just because I think he is, like you said, there's a draft with a lot of uncertainty, and I think there is a comfort level, a level of certainty with Reese-Shea, with his kind of 3-and-D archetype and what translates with the positional size, the shooting, the athleticism, the defensive tools, and at 19 years old, he obviously has room to improve on the ball. So to me, I think he's a safe pick. He fits kind of what they could use. A.J. Griffin has been hurt. They had Sadiq Bey go down. So I'm giving the edge to Reese-Shea, but if there was ever a draft where the number 1 pick totally shocks everyone, this could be that draft.
As we kind of go down the first round, and especially in that lottery, if we're having these conversations on Atlanta not knowing who number 1 is and, where Sarr may fall or fit at 2. But you look at the teams, and especially with Portland and San Antonio, 2 teams that have a lot of holes that they need to fill and 2 picks in that lottery. Mm-hmm. How are you seeing kind of the uneasiness of where some of these guys may fall and kind of projecting? We've gone through all the Blazer draft, mocks that come out, seemingly daily, and it's almost like there's a new combo at 7 and 14 every day. How hard is it to kind of evaluate with so many teams with so many holes in a draft that really isn't as deep to fill everything that these teams are looking for?
Put it this way, this is the lowest level of confidence I've ever had writing a mock draft in any draft I've done in a long time. And as usual, one unexpected pick has a major domino effect down the board. So what a team like Portland is going to do, who has 2 picks in the lottery, they're going to do their own mock drafts, which, believe it or not, teams actually do. They come up with different scenarios. Okay, if so-and-so goes, 1 through 6 and this guy's on the board, they're going to play out all these different scenarios. But realistically, if Houston does something strange at 3, which they very well could do, and certainly, a trade up throws everything off, then everything changes for Portland's strategy and obviously these other teams as well. So really, from what I'm gathering, nobody has any idea what anybody is doing, and which is going to make for an unpredictable draft, but also for a very stressful draft for some teams. And to the point where you have no idea who you're taking until you're actually on the clock.
Okay, let's assume that everything breaks Portland's way and the drafts just kind of the board just falls their way. What do you believe is the home run at 7 and 14 for Portland, the best case scenario for where they select and the guys that they get?
Well, I guess I'll give you a mix of both my own personal, evaluations and also what teams think about these prospects. And it seems like a best case is Donovan Clingan slipping to 7. I'm not as high on Clingan as maybe some other NBA guys are. The fact that he's even in the number 1 overall conversation says a lot about what teams think of him. But to me, he's more of a guy who should go in Portland's range there. And I think he kind of would just give, the Blazers just a big defensive presence that they're kind of lacking, maybe some trade flexibility with DeAndre Ayton. You can maybe flip him for somebody of more of a positional need. But really, to say who you get at 14 may really depend a lot on who you get at 7, right? And so if they take Clingan at 7, which I think a lot of people expect him to be off the board by then, but at the same time, you get centers, and it's very easy to see why maybe a team would not want to double up at that position, since neither of those guys, you can't play 2 of them together at the same time. So if Clingan goes 7, then you got to cancel out a guy like Khalil Ware, who I think is a good value pick at 14. So 14 is really a play it by ear type of pick, and there's a lot of guys I like in that range. And the question is, and it's a strategy that it's really a strategical question for every team, is at that point of the draft, do you draft based on need, or do you draft based on, okay, I think this guy is better than everybody else, even though I'm Portland and I have 4 guards. I love Jared McCain. I think Jared McCain's a top 10 pick in this draft. I think he's going to be there at 14. So it's a tough call. I think a lot is going to depend on how the first 13 picks play out, and of course, who they take at number 7.
2 guys that have been kind of late risers, as it were. One of them you have going number 5 overall. Cody Williams is a guy that could possibly go to Detroit, and the other one, Tejan Salon, are names that have been linked with Portland. They both come through here and worked out for them. When you look at those guys, Portland is stylistically with Joe Cronin, Mike Schmitz, Andre Patterson, that front office group is prioritized that kind of player, toolsy type wings. With those kind of guys moving up publicly, do you think that matches the same sentiment privately that teams are looking at them? Is that they're more upsidey, or is this prime smokescreen season?
No, I think it's actually legit, and I do believe that the way players can kind of be publicly portrayed. I always say it kind of is like a snowball effect. Like as interest builds, or nobody wants to kind of miss out on the player that everybody else seems to like. And Cody Williams, I've asked around a lot on his stock, and I've had more teams ask about Cody Williams to me than probably any prospect, which to me tells you that teams are intrigued and curious. And I know he, maybe not the most polished player, but it seems like teams, want to buy into him, and maybe, naturally has something to do with his brother developing the way he developed. I think Cody Williams is definitely going to be a name that Portland's going to think about at 7. And if he doesn't go top 6 and Klingan's gone, that's probably the most likely guy, in my opinion, of who goes there, just based on fit, based on likability. And, again, this idea that his brother did it. I mean, it's just kind of a natural, logical way to think about things. But and Tejan Salon, same thing. And he's one of the youngest guys in this draft. And if you want to take a bit of a home run swing on a 6'10" guy who made 73s in the pro league overseas, and at 18 years old still has so much more room to grow. I mean, I could very easily see why a team totally buys into Salon. Particularly, I mean, whether he goes 7 or 14, I think if he's 14, he's a lot more attractive than 7. but it does sound like he's helping himself during these workouts from what I'm told. His draft range does seem to be kind of where Portland is at 7, and maybe back to their second pick at 14, but I'd imagine he goes somewhere in that range. And Cody, to me, is that kind of wild card guy who could be the first big surprise of the draft.
We're talking to Bleacher Report's NBA draft insider Jonathan Wasserman. Okay, moving up in the draft, we see a lot of teams are aggressive and they want to go up. What is the buzz right now of teams that are willing or active in making those phone calls as we're a little over a week out from the NBA draft, a team that you may think is more probable than not to move up in this draft?
Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I don't know why there's going to be much of a market for teams to move up, because really the difference between number 3 and number 10 is like non-existent. And in some cases, some guys might like the guy at 10 better than the guy at 3. I've heard from a GM talk about the idea of moving up for Klingham, but do I really want to go up to number 3? You know, it doesn't sound like the confidence in these teams' targets is strong enough where they're going to make a substantial offer. And I guess it will really depend on a team like Houston, who's in that spot right now, who everybody kind of expects to shop this pick because they're trying to make a push to the playoffs and they have all these young guys, not really much room to develop anybody. You know, what is it going to take to get that third pick? And so I think it depends on what it takes, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be teams itching to move up just because you could probably get the guy you want where you're sitting. And on the other hand, teams don't seem to have super confidence in any of these players. So it's not like there's going to be the most attractive guy in the world who's still there. You know, we have to do anything to get him. I can't picture that scenario playing out.
Jonathan, if guys are moving up like Cody Williams and Tijon Salon, that means you've got players falling back. And it sounds like the Ignite guys, modest, maybe not as much, but Ron Holland is being mocked as far as out as 20. And a guy who was a presumptive number 1 overall pick prospect a year ago. What is this a situation that's, similar to Cam Whitmore, where he was looked at as a top 5 through 7, and then the night before, word starts circulating that he's going to fall the next day? Or do you think there's something more inherent to somebody like Holland falling?
I mean, with Holland specifically, going back to Whitmore was red flagged for a potential knee issue that could, hinder him down the road. Obviously he looks great at 20, but we'll see health-wise if those doctors were right. With Holland, from what I'm told, he was so disappointing during his pro day that, pro days are stupid. Let's be real here. It's a one-on-one workout. But it's kind of like, that's when you're supposed to ease the concerns over your bad shooting. It's kind of like a layup, in a sense. This is like the easiest way to get teams to buy back. And he didn't do that. He was pretty bad from what I'm told during his shooting. And teams are kind of, the idea of you have a perimeter wing who gets more turnovers and assists and shoots 25% from 3. I get that on paper. Having said that, I still have Holland on my personal board, top 3. But it does sound like teams are kind of really soured on him. And then, I haven't heard any specific players who are tanking workouts or anything, but just by process of elimination, by teams, what they need and how they fit. I don't see how Rob Dillingham, I think he's a guy who's going to have to slip just based on, 6'1" in socks, 6'3" wingspan, 164 pounds. I think there's only 4 NBA players who are lighter than Dillingham, and with his shot selection, his style of play, and all the teams that already have lead ball handlers, meaning he's probably going to play some 2 and get killed defensively. Dillingham's a guy to me that's going to slip maybe outside the top 10.
Look, anytime that a team is going through a rebuild, a fan base has questions on the direction, the path, and the faith in the front office. Here in Portland, especially with the trust issues that were built up with the former general manager and president of basketball operations and Neil O'Shea, it's kind of exacerbated. I want to ask you, as you talk to general managers around the league, decision makers in the NBA, and you yourself with your evaluation of talent, what is the idea in league circles of Joe Cronin, his staff, in their evaluation of talent and of faith kind of in the Blazers rebuild?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can give you a confident, concrete, opinion on him or for what everybody thinks. Listen, the Scoot is going to be a big one. He's still too early to really judge, and he is, in my mind at the time I had him 2 on the board, and I think how he plays over the next couple of years, how he develops, and I know he played much better. That's going to play a big role in how teams look at the front office, because that was a very important pick. And so we're still kind of in wait and see mode with what they do. And Shaden Sharp is, I mean, listen, I don't watch as much Blazers as you guys do, so I don't see the everyday development, but we're still in wait and see mode on a lot of these young guys, and injuries have kind of screwed things up. I will say, you know, the Jeremy Grant and Ayton combo with young guards, like, you know, it's kind of like half the team is stuck in two different timelines here. But I'm not really sure what the consensus is on the management, but obviously a lot is going to have to do with how these young guys develop over the next couple of years.
You're a very busy man, especially this time of year. We appreciate the time. Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report and lead NBA scout and draft insider for Bleacher Report. Thanks for the time, man. Really appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
There it is. Like, I love having a guy who's in it, like, day to day. That's exactly what he does every single day. Basically saying, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
That's this draft.
This is what I've been trying to tell people for literal months, man. There's so much up in the air. If you're like, if you don't take Ron Holland, you're crazy. It's like, buddy, no one in the league says that about anyone in this draft. Alex Sarr is the only one who people look at and go, yeah, he's like, if I'm going to take somebody number one, like, that's who I'd risk it for.
But even Atlanta, who is sitting number one.
And well, there's some intel there that Sarr is trying to not go to Atlanta. So it's always some interesting framing.
Did not like great wings.
Look, man,
Magic City.
Maybe he's going for Washington D.C.
Lou Williams risked it all in the bubble for those Magic City
there's
wings.
A French teammate in Washington. Him and Koulibaly, they could build a little French connection together. Wouldn't be surprised to see in Atlanta. Do you want to bring in a player that doesn't want to be there?
No. Nope.
It is a risky proposition. You have 5 years basically to. Well, you have 9 years really to figure it out, because nobody turns down that next extension. But
what's wild is a lack of faith that you can create an environment that makes him happy.
Yeah.
You know, like, because that's what teams will do is like, all right, what do we need to do to create the environment that makes him want to be here and be successful? Because the number one overall pick will be the star of our team.
Well, and think about this.
In face of our franchise.
As Jonathan said, Landry Fields, the GM, went out and had a press conference yesterday. Why'd you go out and hold a press conference in the middle of draft prep?
We are not trading the pick, as he's holding up like a proof of life newspaper that the date is on there.
My "We are not trading the pick" T-shirt is not answering enough questions right now. Like, clearly, the front office does not know what they want to do.
Yeah,
and we are a little bit more than a week away from the NBA draft.